So right here, you can see the pressure written all over his face. The guy is standing there, completely lost in his thoughts, and it's obvious this isn't a small decision. When someone asks what he's thinking about, he finally looks up. And the old man smiles. Not warmly, calmly. He closes his eyes and says something that instantly shifts the entire mood. He tells his grandson straight up, you have money, but you don't have time. You don't have strength, and you don't have people. And that stings. The grandson squints in irritation, but he doesn't fire back. Then the chairman's expression turns cold. He says if you refuse this deal, both the construction company and CMS disappear. No drama, no debate. They're just gone. Now the young man looks down and you can see it hitting him. His grandfather is right. The kind of hesitation he's holding onto, that's a luxury. And he doesn't have the privilege of luxury right now. There is no second path. He grits his teeth. He realizes maybe he should have trusted the stability his grandfather built instead of trying to do this his own way. But instead of backing off, he tightens control. He announces there will be no accounting audit, and Sean will take the director's position. The old man just grins and asks something simple but loaded. Will you at least have the key to the storeroom? The grandson stays silent. Then the chairman stands and really starts explaining how this world works. He says builders are unmatched when it comes to cutting money. Construction workers can do it with their eyes closed. They hire and fire laborers daily. Materials move constantly. And he asks, would you even notice if they swapped high-grade wood worth hundreds of thousands for cheap wood worth a fraction of that? Would you catch it if they manipulated the weight of fittings, skimmed steel, even shaved off supplies from the cafeteria? The grandson listens calmly, but inside you can tell it, landing. Then the chairman drops it bluntly. You've spent your whole life pressing numbers on a calculator. Can you really fight people who cheat for a living? And that silence says everything. The chairman leans in and says construction sites are where money literally falls from the sky. They're the biggest breeding ground for corruption in Korea. Bidding gets manipulated. Managers and subcontractors cut quiet deals. Costs get shaved in ways you can't see unless you're standing in the mud yourself. He paints this picture of mud grabbing at your shoes, black hands reaching up and staining your jacket. And the grandson asks something real. Can you understand the essence of something without stepping into that muddy water? The old man narrows his eyes and smiles. If you want to control construction companies on your terms, you first learn how to deal with laborers. That's where real money moves. And when it comes to handling money from unclear sources, there is nothing better than a construction company to absorb it. That's when it clicks for him. He finally understands he answered his grandfather wrong before. If he wants control, he can't just stay clean on the surface. He needs to understand the system without being swallowed by it. The old man looks satisfied. Another lesson delivered. Then he leans back and says tomorrow he'll send his own audit team from Eson Construction. Sean's accountants won't compete with his people. These are professionals. They'll find every receipt, every tax report, every document that slipped through. And in that moment, Dijun realizes something serious. After all this support, if they fail to absorb the construction company, it will be entirely his fault. He bows and thanks his grandfather. But then the chairman says something colder. Later, I'll thank you too. The grandson looks confused. The chairman smiles and explains that everything happening right now is for the well-being of the Saying group. So if one day Grandpa stabs you in the back, don't cry about it. And he laughs. The grandson gives a small smile. He understands now. This isn't family, this is power. Cut to the next morning. Clear blue sky over the skyscraper. Calm outside, not calm inside. Employees in the lobby suddenly freeze. The receptionist jumps up from her seat. A group of men in suits walks in with purpose. At the front is Sean. Mugen rushes over, asking what they're doing here. Sean looks around calmly, and says this probably isn't the best place to talk. So they move into the conference room. Round table, doors close, the energy changes immediately. Mugen turns and asks what this is about. Wasn't a buyer supposed to be found overnight? He says he'll decide everything within a day. Sean walks past him and says something simple and sharp. Is it still not clear who's sitting in the executive director's chair? Then he crosses his arms and says they are considering exercising their rights as the largest shareholder. Mugen looks confused. Sean adjusts his glasses and calmly cites Article 14 of the External Audit Law, Clause 5. Shareholders and creditors have the right to inspect company records at any time and request reports on expenses. The executive director physically flinches. Sean asks for accounting reports from last year and the year before, all supporting documents included. He says the shareholders want to see for themselves how the company reached this situation. The room goes silent. The director looks around like he's searching for help. Standing among the accountants, the main character says the documents should be provided immediately. If not, the situation will escalate. The director just stares, stunned. Now in another office, panic starts brewing. Another employee says he thought yesterday's meeting went well. Mugen explains that Sean came back after saying he wanted to resell shares. This move caught them off guard. The CEO calls Manager Sun to confirm. Yes, the investors are already inside. The director grits his teeth and starts insulting them under his breath. The CEO tries to calm it down. Maybe it's just a tactic to push the stock price up. But Mugen shakes his head. He saw Sean's eyes yesterday. He's not reckless, he's a broker. He moves for money, not drama. Still, they try to convince themselves it might be a show. They say investors gain nothing from external audits. So what's the angle? One of them suggests bringing Sean in, exposing his bluff, and sending him back. But Nan says they don't have time. If this spreads, it becomes a bigger issue. They need to stop it now. The CEO agrees. Bring him in. Back in the conference room, Sean says not to waste time. Bring the reports. The executive director's veins are practically visible now. In another office, Mugen paces back and forth. His brother tries to calm him down. The investors don't know what's hidden. They're probably just trying to apply pressure before negotiations. Mugen even smiles and says they won't know what to look for. Once they're buried in documents, he'll deal with them. But inside the conference room, the energy is different. Folders stack up, papers cover the table, accountants move carefully, checking everything line by line. One man with glasses studies the files closely. Another employee whispers details. The main character watches quietly. Then one accountant approaches Sean and says this looks like currency fraud. Sean takes the file and reviews it himself. The employee explains that money from the last overseas transfer never actually entered Korea. Sean looks up and asks directly, did they manipulate exchange rates to steal dollars? The accountant nods. Management claimed they were importing raw materials. They used fluctuating exchange rates as cover. Then Dijun asks if the import itself was fake. The man with glasses explains clearly. According to the invoice, they imported expensive furnishings like chandeliers. Based on size and volume, that shipment should require at least 6 containers. Customs records show only 1, which means they deceived customs. Sean asks if there's any chance of error. The accountant says they've handled items like this hundreds of times. They might forget small things at home, but they don't misjudge container volume. No mistake. Sean closes his eyes briefly and stands. He says maybe it's time to start the show. But his partner stops him and tells him to make a call first. He takes out his phone. The accountants watch as he calls his grandfather. He says it's been less than 2 hours and they've already hit the jackpot. At this rate, He'll secure his license soon. The chairman leans back and smiles. He says those people are real professionals. Then he says he'll call the prosecutor. By the end of the day, there will be a search and seizure warrant. The grandson thanks him. He ends the call. Jean smirks. Then he walks toward the director's office. The investors step inside. Mugen jumps up and asks why they finished so quickly. He jokes that maybe their eyes got tired from reading paperwork. But this time, nobody's laughing, because now it's not an audit anymore. So now we move into the confrontation. The main character looks at them with a completely serious expression. No sarcasm, no hesitation, just calm pressure. The directors freeze. And then he says something that hits harder than shouting. Looking at them, he says he finally understands why the company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Because they're not the type of people who can sit still for even 2 hours without panicking. That cuts deep. The CEO frowns and snaps back, asking if his guest has no manners or if he just thinks he's too smart. Dujan doesn't flinch. He says it's precisely because he has manners that he already reported the entire management of Do Construction, including the owner's family, to the prosecutor's office. And then he asks calmly, "Is that enough for you to start speaking politely?" That changes everything. M jumps out of his chair, completely thrown off. He doesn't understand what just happened. But Dujan keeps the same expression and tells them they can confirm it themselves. The shareholders already dropped a couple of gifts at the prosecutor's office. The brothers look at each other. Mugen storms out of the office, pointing at the investors. The CEO demands to know why they would do something like this. If the company collapses, their shares become worthless paper. Sean just narrows his eyes. He doesn't even need to answer. Then suddenly, an executive director rushes to the door, visibly shaken. He announces that the Department of Financial Investigations in the Western region has already issued a warrant. And judging by how fast everything is moving, someone powerful pushed this forward. Now it's real. The brother grits his teeth. The tension between them is thick. The young man calmly says something interesting. After the takeover of On Motors and Sang Motors, they gained a few life preservers. So even if things get rough, they can support each other. Then he smiles and asks, "Do you need to grease a few officials to slow things down? You seem experienced in that area. Maybe you can give some advice." That one lands like a slap. Then he adds something colder. All executives and family members are now prohibited from leaving the country. So instead of thinking about escaping, maybe they should focus on cooperating with the investigation. The director's faces change immediately. Sean turns and walks out, his team following him. But right before leaving, he stops. Then he makes a little phone gesture with his fingers and says, "You have my number. It might be useful if things get scary in the interrogation room." And just like that, they're left standing there, stunned. Now we shift to night. Inside the chairman's office, several executives are gathered around a round table. The atmosphere is serious. The chairman looks around and asks who the youngest person there is. They point to Kik, the director of the construction support office. The chairman asks when he became director. "Last spring." The chairman crosses his arms and casually says, "You'll be promoted again in a year." The room goes quiet. People exchange confused looks. How do you jump from executive director to director and then rise again in just a year? Then Hack explains, Kik won't just be promoted internally. He'll be transferred to another company. His title will rise 1 or 2 levels compared to his current position at Eson Construction. Now everyone looks even more confused. Because that other company is Do Construction. And right now, Do Construction is collapsing. When the announcement is made official, you can see the shock on their faces. They're being transferred to Do Construction. Some of them look terrified. They were expecting safe branch transfers, not a sinking ship. The chairman notices the fear and says he'll explain. Fantasy Investment will soon take over Do Construction, and he asks if they're familiar with that company. Someone connects the dots. Is this the same investment company that acquired On Motors and merged with Sang Motors? Yes, the same one. Fantasy plans to become the largest shareholder of Do Construction within 2 or 3 months. Someone nervously mentions the bankruptcy rumors. The chairman says Fantasy will pull the company out of bankruptcy and take it to the top. But the employees still look uneasy. So he becomes firm, do as instructed, bring the company back to normal as fast as possible. Then he adds something bigger. After stabilization within 2 years, Do Construction will become a subsidiary of the Sang Group, not a merger, a separate company within the group. That changes the mood. Now it's opportunity. Then one director asks the real question. What exactly is the relationship between Sang Group and Fantasy? Did the chairman create Fantasy himself? The room goes silent. The chairman smiles and says it would be nice if Fantasy belonged to him. But according to rumors, its owner is a serious money bag. Still, he adds something important. The majority shareholder is someone trustworthy. You can think of Fantasy as operating with that person's capital. Hack's eyes widen. Memories flash in his head. The way support was given during the On Motors takeover. The way resources were allocated. The puzzle pieces fall into place. The inheritance isn't for the son. It's for the grandson. The chairman sits back calmly, satisfied. Now we shift again. Interrogation room. The CEO sits there. Sean stands in front of him. Sean offers him a deal. If he cooperates, he doesn't need to flee the country. He can stay in Korea. But if he refuses, the money paid to his children under fake salaries will be reclaimed as illegal gifts. The CEO says nothing. Then an employee slams folders on the table and points at him. You approved this. You stamped it. The country is on the brink of destruction and you were stuffing your own pockets. The CEO explodes, asking how they dare speak to him like that. A prosecutor calmly offers him a cigarette. Then he asks a strange question. Who is the most powerful person in Korea right now? The CEO hesitates. The prosecutor answers it himself. The one who has dollars is king. Fantasy Investment currently holds dollars. They're negotiating with the government directly. If they acquire bankrupt Do Construction, they'll pay in dollars. The CEO realizes he was unlucky enough to become their prey. The prosecutor calmly says the evidence is overwhelming. Documents, testimonies, financial trails. Then we cut back to negotiations. The director of Do Construction sits across from Fantasy's representative. The demand is simple. Return every stolen one. Then the investors will buy back the shares owned by his family. The investigation will quietly close. The CEO asks if the investigation really ends. The answer is yes. He lowers his head and agrees to cooperate. Now we move to the highway. Sean is in the car reviewing reports. The number comes out to 80 billion. But Doojan says even if that's only half, there has to be at least 150 billion hidden. His partner says maybe even 200 billion. Sean turns from the window, his jaw tightening. The director stole 80 billion just last year. Imagine the total across his entire career. He places his hand on the window and says they'll find every stolen dollar. And that old man, he'll trade the rest of his life for money. Because the thought of someone that pathetic enjoying wealth from selling shares makes his blood boil. And now it's no longer about takeover. It's personal. So after everything, the main character says there's no other option. If he wants full control, he has to pay for all the shares himself to enter the company properly. His partner raises his eyebrows and asks, "Are you really going to make a public statement about this?" The boy looks at him and calmly says no. First, he wants them to meet his grandfather. That line says a lot. He looks back out the window. The sun is lighting up the city buildings, and there's this quiet moment where you realize something. Life spins however it wants. For some people, it's a playground. For others, it's basically the circles of hell. The car keeps moving. Night falls. Now we're back in the chairman's office. The lights are still on. A mug of tea is placed on the table. Someone asks if the general director returned everything he stole. The boy sitting on the leather sofa says that Muang only admitted to 80 billion. That's just what he confessed to. Yan asks something interesting. When you receive the shares, are you planning to pay me back? Because the amount will be massive. The boy answers calmly. The theft was exposed, so he'll return the money for the shares on one condition: Mu avoids a real prison sentence. The chairman actually laughs, surprised at how easily his grandson cleaned out the director. But the young man's face hardens. He says he can't forgive him that easily. That catches the old man's attention. What made you so angry? And here where it shifts. The grandson says if Mu had taken care of the employees' overdue salaries, he would have given him enough money without a fight. But more than 2,000 employees have been living in poverty for 3 months. You see people walking toward banks. Loans are hard to get, but some of them had no choice just to survive. The main character says he wants Mu to feel that same desperation. His eyes are burning when he says it. The chairman looks at him differently, almost surprised. He says it's like he's seeing another person. How do you know what those workers feel? The grandson lowers his head. Because he used to be one of them. We get this flashback image of his previous life, holding an envelope, calculating how long his salary would last, knowing that if it was delayed even 1 month, his family would fall into debt they couldn't escape. He says he can't forget the dark faces of those employees when he first came to do construction. The chairman closes his eyes and tells him something important. Never forget that. No matter what happens, you must feed the employees. There's nothing worse than hunger. The grandson looks confused for a second. Then the chairman explains. When people starve, they betray. And that's exactly what happened. The employees in charge of receipts turned against their director and exposed everything. Not because they were righteous, because they were desperate. Then he drops something deeper. There are 2 types of people who betray. The ones who are so hungry they can't endure it anymore. And the ones who can never get enough, no matter how much they eat. In both cases, leadership failed. The grandson listens carefully, his eyes clear. He understands now this isn't sympathy, it's strategy. Feed your people, or they will destroy you. They sit in silence. Then the scene shifts to February 25, 1998. The inauguration of the President of the Republic of Korea. The country is changing. Economically unstable, politically tense. Back in a meeting room, Sean speaks up. He says innocent employees of Do Construction shouldn't be thrown into the street. If creditors show understanding, this transition can be controlled. One creditor asks what kind of understanding he's talking about. Sean places a folder on the table. Inside is a control structure linked to Sang Group. A clear organizational scheme showing how management would be stabilized. The creditors study it carefully. One of them admits it's an effective control model, so he asks directly, "What does Fantasy want?" Sean answers calmly, "Extend the loan repayment period for at least 1 year." What else? Reduce interest rates, write off certain debts, and transfer the voting rights held by the banks in Do Construction to Fantasy. That shocks the room. One creditor says those shares are their only control over management. They can't just give that away. Sean leans forward and asks, "Is your current control helping a company that's already dying? Once it stabilizes, Voting rights will be returned. Silence. They ask if there's anything else. Sean is about to say no. But the main character interrupts. He asks if the creditors are planning to sell Suwon Bank. Everyone looks at him. From a financial stability standpoint, could Suwon Bank recover? The lender says yes. It's smaller than other dangerous institutions, which is why it's being put up for sale. Then the main character smiles slightly. If the government is pushing overseas sales, isn't this an opportunity? The room goes quiet. Sean raises his eyebrows at him. They wrap up the meeting. Outside, Sean asks if he was serious about buying a bank. The boy asks him something simple. When there's a whale in front of you, don't the other fish look small? Sean's eyes widen. He calls the tactic excellent. But inside, the main character is thinking something else. What would Sean's expression look like if he knew the offer to buy the bank wasn't a tactic? It was real. Now we shift again. At the company building, appointment letters are being issued. Yonggi looks at one with frustration. Managers from the construction branch are resigning en masse without even informing him. An employee explains that Director Jang Chul received instructions directly from the chairman. Everyone he hired is moving to fantasy investment. Yonggi immediately thinks of Sean. This feels just like the Sang Motors situation. He starts wondering if fantasy is his father's personal wallet, but he quickly dismisses that. If it were, the chairman would never expose it so openly. He demands more information. The employee says everyone was told to stay silent. Yonggi thinks for a moment and asks about Kungi, the youngest among the chairman's people. Enthusiastic, recently promoted, eager to impress. That's the weak point, so he invites him to dinner. Night. Food on the table, alcohol poured. Yonggi congratulates him on the promotion. They talk casually. Kungi says working with director Sean is fine. He's open-minded, lived abroad, easy to approach. Yonggi watches carefully. If they're this relaxed, maybe they're not suspicious of him. So he applies pressure subtly. How's business going? Kungi says Do Construction is about to be bought out. The Sanama Media City concept is finalized. Detailed plans are ready. Construction timeline and cost projections will be completed within the first half of the year. Yonggi doesn't even understand what he's hearing. Media City buyout. Then Kungi says something that really shifts it. Department head Dujan is incredible. He's learning a lot from the chairman's grandson. Yonggi freezes slightly. Department head. This is the first time he's hearing that title. Kungi explains it was on the business card Dujan gave when Sean introduced him properly. Yonggi's expression becomes serious. He asks what exactly his youngest nephew is learning. And the conversation just got dangerous. So at this dinner, the director raises his hand and says something calmly. Even if the chairman hadn't said anything, he would have figured it out anyway. The target is clear. Investment, mergers, acquisitions. Yonggi asks directly, so that's the goal. Director Sean just shrugs, yes. Now Yonggi smiles to himself. In his head, he imagines the chairman's office stained with blood. Because if Dujan is handling investments and M&A but isn't officially part of Sang Group, that means something important. It means he has no formal claim to the throne. That thought comforts him. So he casually says he once hoped his nephew would become a prosecutor. But apparently, you can't fool blood. The instinct for finance runs too deep. He fills his colleague's cup and shifts the topic. He wants to hear more. Is everything going smoothly with the Do construction project? He pretends he hasn't paid attention to it because it's technically external. Kungi replies confidently, everything's going great. Then he mentions something big. It's a multi-trillion-won project. Yonggi freezes for a split second. Multi-trillion. Across the country, Companies are collapsing, and somehow this group is pushing forward a multi-trillion won development. His hand trembles slightly as he holds his cup. Wrinkles form across his forehead. Why isn't Sang Construction handling something this massive? Why is an outside structure like Fantasy doing it? What exactly is his father planning? Kungi notices the tension and looks concerned. Yangi lowers his gaze and asks carefully, if this project finishes successfully, wouldn't Fantasy clearly have the upper hand? Wouldn't teaming up with Sang afterward be difficult? But Kungi responds differently than expected. The chairman sees it another way. Yangi realizes he may have pushed too hard, so he waves it off and says, let's not talk about work. Let's just eat. Kungi lowers his eyes quietly. The mood shifts. Yangi understands. Dig any deeper and it'll look suspicious. Now we move to the S building. There's a sign on the desk that says President Dongi. The vice chairman enters the room. Dongi asks why he came without calling first. Yangi says he wanted to discuss something privately. Yangi asks if he's heard that executives from Sang Construction are resigning en masse. Dongi says the whole company is agitated because of it. Yangi presses further, does he know why? Dongi says he's heard rumors. Are they connected to Fantasy, to Sean? Dongi admits all the workers are moving to UO under Fantasy. Now Yangi starts thinking. His brother clearly already knows about the acquisition of Do Construction. He has eyes everywhere. So he asks the real question. What connects their father to Sean from Fantasy? Dongi shrugs and asks if he even cares. Yangi asks back, don't you? Dongi says not yet. That irritates him. Dongi explains his reasoning. The chairman loves Dujan, and since Yoongi is the youngest son and earning well, it would make sense for their father to leave something as inheritance. Yangi turns sharply. You mean Fantasy? Dongi nods. Sean and Yoongi are friends, so the chairman may have invested capital, trained him, and helped him acquire shares. But if the younger son received something openly from Sang Group, the older sons would take it back. So it had to be structured differently. Yangi narrows his eyes. So that's why motors and construction were given to Yoongi. Was that too much for him? Dongi explains calmly. Do Construction's production scale is half of Sang's. It's unlikely the chairman would carve up Sang Construction itself. Yangi doesn't look convinced. Then he drops something explosive. Do Construction is about to take over a multi-trillion won contract. Dongi jumps up. Several trillion. Yes, and if it succeeds, they'll stand on equal footing with Sang Construction. So is it worth checking why such a gold mine is being handed to an outsider? Dongi's expression tightens. He asks how this even makes sense. The country is short on money. Do Construction is nearly bankrupt. If they had that kind of capital, they'd be paying off debt. Yangi leans in and says maybe their father is controlling everything from the shadows. Silence. Dongi sits back down thinking. Yangi repeats it. The chairman handed Yoongi Motors. Would he also allow a massive project like this to fall into someone else's hands? Could it just be a gift? That word lands heavily. Dongi clenches his fists and demands to know what Yangi wants. Yangi answers calmly. Let's ask father directly. Are we not enough heirs fighting for the Sang Cup? Dongi explodes, accusing him of always running to their father with problems. Yangi adjusts his glasses calmly. If you go alone, it looks like whining. If we go together, it looks like business. We'll say we want information, offer our help, propose to take over Do Construction ourselves and make the project successful. Now it sounds strategic. Dongi hesitates. He starts thinking about inheritance, about whether their younger brother may have changed his mind and wants to leave something for Dujan. Yangi finds that unexpected. Dongi admits something quietly. Dujan actually looks more capable than his own father. He never disappoints their grandfather. That observation hangs in the air. Finally, they go to their father's office. The chairman stands there, arms crossed. The tension is visible. Sweat runs down the eldest son's face. The chairman smiles slightly and says something chilling. Before making a fuss as heirs of Sang, shouldn't you first figure out whether the opponent is holding a knife or a rose? Yonggi asks what he means. The chairman reminds them of something from 4 months ago. When Sang Motors brought in $1 billion, he offered to exchange it, taking commission, taking shares in return. Dongyi bursts out angrily, calling it brazen robbery. The chairman's gaze turns cold. What do you mean by unfair? Suddenly Dongyi remembers 10 days ago, when bankruptcy seemed unavoidable. He had no choice but to accept additional conditions. He lowers his head and apologizes. The chairman says he gave up some motor shares and some group shares to survive the crisis and deal with the IMF. So there's no need to be angry now. Then he laughs and asks whether they considered his motives before questioning him. Dongyi tries to soften the situation. They're not challenging him, they just want to understand his logic. The chairman asks a strange question. Do you know the name of the wooden horse the enemy hid soldiers inside? Trojan horse. And suddenly it clicks. The chairman smiles. He says he must reclaim what rightfully belongs to him. Both brothers finally understand. This wasn't charity. It was infiltration. Yonggi purses his lips, realizing something bitter. Even though they're over 40. Dongyi keeps squinting, and you can literally see the sweat rolling down his face. He's thinking the same thing over and over. Their father still hasn't explained anything about Do construction, and he definitely hasn't said a word about Dujun's real role. The chairman crosses his arms and finally speaks clearly. Fantasy Investment is using them right now to absorb Do construction. Once that's done, they'll start working on a massive project. In the near future, Fantasy will become a highly influential company. The sons look stunned. Then the chairman drops the bigger piece. Do construction will eventually be absorbed by AIN Corporation, which will operate under the Sang Group structure. He stays seated, arms crossed, completely calm. He says he gave up motors before, but AIN Corporation and Do's interest must return to him. Yonggi smiles awkwardly and asks what they're supposed to think about all this. The chairman responds firmly. He doesn't know exactly when the full plan will be implemented, but most likely his sons will be the ones working on this project. One of them forces a smile and says they'll keep that in mind. Dongyi glances at his brother, clearly annoyed. He knows their father hasn't revealed everything. He never does. The chairman closes his eyes. Dongyi thinks to himself, father always pretends he's telling us everything, but the key pieces, those stay hidden. And now he decides to test something. He says yes, they should bring AIN Corporation and Do construction back, but not under the name of Sang Corporation. That shocks the chairman. Yonggi turns sharply toward his brother. Then Dongyi says something unexpected. After AIN joins the group, motors should go to Yonggi. The chairman narrows his eyes. Why did you say Yonggi's name? Yonggi looks confused. He's waiting for the explanation too. Dongyi continues. Motor should go to Dujun. He's the smartest among the children. That hits the room hard. He admits something quietly. He always felt Yonggi lacked ambition, that his son's potential was being wasted. Yonggi clenches his teeth. He doesn't say it openly, but he clearly feels insulted. The chairman closes his eyes and smiles slightly. He can see through it. Dongyi isn't praising Dujun out of love. He's positioning him. The brothers are staring at each other with quiet hostility now. The chairman thinks to himself. He has a special affection for his eldest son, and he respects Dongyi for being able to separate feelings from work. But now he wonders something else. Who is really taking care of whom? because these two are so busy fighting each other. They haven't even noticed that their nephew is slowly taking over the company right under their noses. Dongi looks at his father firmly. The chairman's veins appear on his forehead as he frowns. Why do you think you can generously dispose of what belongs to me? It's not yours to give. That shuts Dongi down immediately. He bows and apologizes, saying he crossed the line because he was frustrated at how unfair life seemed for someone as talented as Dujan. The chairman waves his hand irritably. I've told you enough. Go think about strategy. The sons bow. But before they leave, the chairman gives one more instruction. Both of you should attend the announcement of AIN Group's rebirth. Congratulate Sean. Support Du. Dongi visibly winces. And then the chairman adds something darker. Watch carefully how your company passes into someone else's hands, and remember that feeling. Sweat runs down Yangi's face. They leave. The chairman leans back in his chair and sighs deeply. Protecting his grandson from his own sons is exhausting. Even at his age, he's still trapped in strategy and intrigue. Now we move to the founding ceremony. Men in black suits stand on stage. The chairman stands at the podium and thanks the employees. He admits he once put the company in danger, but now they're rebuilding. He says they must become an eternally young company, driven by creative thinking and unshakable will. Then comes the announcement. From today on, the names Ain and Sang will disappear. A red curtain drops. Golden letters reveal the new name. HW. The crowd applauds. Sean, sitting in the front row, smiles. Now we shift to the chairman's mansion at sunset. Dujan walks in wearing a black suit. The chairman looks surprised. Why aren't you at the banquet? Dujan lifts a black bag and smiles. Thanks to you, I became the owner of AIN Group. An event like that shouldn't be celebrated alone. He takes out bottles and places them on the table. It's a congratulatory gift. The chairman looks slightly annoyed and asks why he brought alcohol to what used to be a bankrupt company. Dujan smiles and explains. This brand of soju has a 70-year history. Even if the company went bankrupt, the product never disappeared. He looks at his grandfather closely and says this brand won't disappear in the future either. The chairman holds the bottle thoughtfully, a product that survives even if the owner changes. He smiles. They pour drinks. The chairman congratulates him and praises him for a job well done. Dujan bows deeply and says none of this would have happened without his grandfather giving him land years ago. The chairman says something powerful. Many grandchildren of Korean tycoons receive ranches worth tens of millions when they're young, but they don't multiply it. You're the only one who turned starting capital into thousands of times more. That was your achievement. They drink. Dujan remembers the past. The taste of soju feels different now. Then the chairman asks about Du construction. Dujan explains negotiations with the banks are going smoothly. Employees have received partial payments. The process of recovering stolen money from Director Munson is ongoing. The chairman nods and says the prosecutor's office did good work. Dujan mentions they paid generously for that service. Then he says something interesting. The director refused to give a percentage from the sale of his shares, even after being threatened with the arrest of his children and grandchildren. Money is terrifying. Some people can't let it go, even for family. The chairman narrows his eyes. That's not exactly true. He explains something deeper. The money from the sale of shares is Munson's last weapon. He hasn't used it yet, but he will. Dujan looks surprised. The chairman continues. After the court verdict, do you think that money will go back to you? Dujan says yes, that's what he expected. The chairman grins. Munson will make sure the money goes to the state treasury instead of you. Dujan freezes. Now it makes sense. If Munson returns the money willingly, he and his family might avoid prison. But if he resists, the money goes to the government and his relatives face arrest. Either way, he's cornered. And Dujan realizes the game isn't over yet. Not even close. Dujan's eyes widen even more. In his mind, there was only one logical outcome. Munson either cooperates and survives, or he refuses and everything collapses. So why is his grandfather hinting at something else? The chairman crosses his arms and says calmly that Dujan is getting carried away by useless emotions. Dujan frowns and argues back. That's not true. He's thinking about money. He's thinking about stabilizing the company. The chairman closes his eyes. A drop of sweat rolls down Dujan's face when his grandfather says the real issue isn't money. It's fairness. Right now, you're angry because of justice, because management didn't pay salaries, because they stole from a company that was already collapsing. Dujan stiffens. Then the chairman says something sharp. Do you really think Munson's family did all this just to live beautifully forever? He smiles faintly and adds, the director sees your potential. He sees a young businessman in front of him. And he's waiting. He's waiting for you to make him a better offer. If he holds out long enough, you'll end up with nothing. Dujan listens, eyes wide. The chairman crosses his arms and says he finds it amusing watching a businessman judge others emotionally. You shouldn't care how other people live. The most important thing for a businessman is simple: move other people's money into your own hands, even if the amount looks small. That's the game. Dujan clenches his fists. Sweat runs down his face as he finally understands something about himself. He wasn't just angry at Munson. He saw himself in those unpaid employees. He remembered his past life, standing with an envelope in his hand, calculating survival. That's why it burned. The chairman leans forward and says, think again. The director will agree to split the money, as long as part of it remains with him. Dujan winces but doesn't argue. Then he asks directly, are you suggesting we leave him some money so his family avoids prison? The chairman closes his eyes and answers calmly. Leave him half the value of the shares, publicly say he repented. Give him a suspended sentence. That would be a clean solution. Dujan tightens his fists. The chairman says think bigger. The priority is money. His punishment doesn't matter unless he becomes a threat. Focus on making as much money as possible. Ignore him until he becomes dangerous. That lands. Dujan finally bows his head and thanks his grandfather. He says he'll handle it like a real businessman. The chairman watches him quietly. Now we move to prison. Bars on the windows, small room, two men sitting across from each other. Dujan folds his hands politely and asks what Munson thinks about prison food. Munson rests his head on his hand and says he's paying for the mistake of underestimating fantasy, but at least he can eat. Dujan narrows his eyes. He can tell Munson still believes he has leverage. So he gets straight to the point. Visits are limited. If you refuse to hand over the proceeds from the share sale or transfer the shares, hear what happens. Munson interrupts and tells him to stop circling around. Dujan lays out the offer clearly. If you agree, the investigation ends. The real sentence becomes suspended. You keep your position as advisor in the company. Advisor salaries can be very generous. We'll present the whole case as a misunderstanding. Media will soften the story. You're good at business. That narrative will stick. Munson listens carefully. Dujan knows something important. As people age, reputation matters more than money. Being an advisor to construction is better than being remembered as a criminal who served time for embezzlement. Dujan makes it clear if you go extreme, you lose everything, money and name. Munson puts his hands on the table and says Sean is picky about details. Then he asks the real question. The money from the shares, Will it go toward company expenses? That sounds expensive for someone who's just an advisor. Dujun smiles slightly. Advisor's salary will be higher as compensation. Munson smiles back. He extends his hand and says paying taxes faithfully is the duty of every citizen. Take care of me. They shake hands. Dujun says he'll prepare the contract. Now back at the office. Sean hears that Munson will become an advisor and winces in irritation. Dujun sits calmly, reading a newspaper. He explains the structure. They get all the shares. Munson only gets salary. Yes, it costs something, but control is everything. Sean asks if Munson really agreed. Dujun says he had no choice. If he refused, his family would go to prison, and if the share money went to taxes, he'd lose everything anyway. So he chose to share instead of surrender. Sean asks how much they're paying him. Dujun answers calmly. 30% of the share value, spread over 10 years. Sean sits back and calculates. It's still a win, but he's worried Munson might earn more than the new director of Do Construction. Dujun smiles. Only at first. He explains the former director will receive the agreed amount for 2 months. Then they'll gradually cut his salary. So he experiences the same fear his employees felt. Now it's not just strategy. It's controlled revenge. And Dujun has officially stepped into the mud without drowning. The man slowly removes his hand from his face and looks at Dujun carefully. Dujun crosses his arms and says calmly that the country is going through hard times. Until Do Construction turns profitable, they'll have to tighten spending. Then he smirks slightly. That's exactly what you used to tell your employees every time you delayed their salaries. Now we shift. An airplane is cutting through the sky. Dujun is sitting comfortably in his seat, wearing a sweatshirt, reading a book. The man next to him looks nervous, glancing around. Dujun smiles and says, "Relax. Everything on this flight is already paid for. Order a drink, eat something, it's a long trip." Yuno looks surprised but doesn't argue. Then he says there's something about Yonjin he wants to mention. Apparently, Dujun's cousin was appointed director of Sang Construction, even though he wanted to go into electronics. Dujun doesn't even look up from his book. He calmly says the management team moved to Do Construction. There are probably plenty of vacancies now. If his uncle wanted better for his son, he should have aimed higher. Yuno shifts uncomfortably and says that in terms of hierarchy, managing director at Sang Construction isn't bad. It just requires serious work. Dujun closes the book. Then he asks something that makes Yuno sweat. In your opinion, who has more influence in the Sang Corporation? Executive Director of Electronics or Managing Director of Construction? Yuno rubs his face and says electronics sounds stronger. It's the industry leader. Construction isn't in that position. Dujun sighs heavily. He says many company employees can drive cars and run errands. Yuno immediately becomes tense. Dujun clarifies, "I'm talking about our business relationship, between you, me, and manager Shen. What makes a business relationship trustworthy?" Yuno looks confused. Dujun explains something deeper. You have to judge not only visible events but also cause and effect. If your reasoning is logical, you earn trust. If not, you're replaceable. He narrows his eyes and says finding another business partner is easy. Finding someone reliable is. Yuno lowers his head and says he understands. Dujun grins slightly. He's not grabbing him, but he expects growth. Yuno admits he's frustrated. He still carries an errand boy mentality. Dujun just watches him quietly and returns to reading. He thinks to himself, many people want to be the best version of themselves. Few actually act on it. Now we shift continents. Night sky over Jerusalem. On the campus of University H, books are stacked everywhere. Dujun sits on a couch while a scientist types rapidly at his computer. The scientist jokingly asks why a Hollywood wizard came to see an unknown mathematician drowning in equations. Dujun smiles and says they don't only invest in Hollywood. They're interested in technology with real potential. The scientist raises his eyebrows. Did you come here because of coxswains? Dujun calmly asks him to explain. It's an optical solution, a system that measures the precision of metal parts using image recognition, also the company name. Dujun doesn't pretend to fully understand the math. He just says he'll add it to his list of promising companies. The scientist looks stunned. Dujun explains clearly. He's interested in technology that collects camera data with minimal error. The scientist asks how he knows this. Dujun waves it off and says he read his dissertation on AI and computer image recognition. Then he asks something bigger. Where could this technology be applied? The scientist hesitates and says he has ideas, but wants to hear Dujun's thoughts first. Dujun looks at him and says directly, "The eyes of a car." The scientist freezes. Dujun explains it clearly. A small camera mounted on a vehicle could gather environmental data, warn drivers before collisions, display rear camera images on a screen for easier parking. The scientist stands up shocked. Dujun continues. The system could calculate distance from other vehicles, recognize traffic lights, apply brakes automatically, reduce accidents. The scientist adds lane recognition, prevent lane departure, convert analog data to digital, integrate it into vehicle systems. Dujun smiles and says eventually, autopilot, a car that drives itself. The scientist is speechless. Dujun finally gets to the point. He didn't fly here for theory. He wants to invest. The scientist warns him. It sounds like science fiction. It could take years before it becomes commercially viable. Dujun just smiles. What's more beautiful than a dream coming true? Our company is called Fantasy for a reason. He tells the scientist he's staying at the Shelton Hotel nearby. Think it over. Contact me anytime. And by the way, coxswains is part of the deal. He leaves. Walking across the tiled campus floor, Dujun thinks ahead. A 10 trillion won company, powered by autopilot technology. He decides he'll accept almost any condition to secure this. With that technology, On Motors can expand in Korea, compete with global tech giants. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video. Comment next part if you want to see more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the next one.